Yeah, it is an episode of the Autumn Windbags. RJ Clifford here. Let's have some fun today. Sorry I missed last week's Tuesday live chats. I was fighting a sore throat. I was flying home from London. Time change. I wanted to save my throat for the big show on Wednesday and my SiriusXM show Tuesday. So had to make the hard decision, had to make some cuts. But here now, 100%, ready to rock. Nothing little T can't cure. So let's have some fun. So the first thing I want to get to is Mike Mayock. So, like I've said on the show multiple times, when whatever decision Mark Davis and company made on whether keeping or getting rid of Mayock, I supported. Because I'm going to assume, I don't think it's a giant assumption, to assume that Mark Davis was aware on which draft picks were mostly Mayock and which ones were mostly Gruden. Now, obviously, Gruden bears all the responsibility for every draft pick because he had final say, right? He's the captain of the ship, right? Whatever happens, whether it was 99% Mayock pushing for something, it still ended up on him. That's the cost of wearing the crown, right? Everything good, everything bad that happens, you bear the responsibility for. But it does matter to me who was pushing for certain guys. And so when Mark Davis got rid of Mayock, I supported it because that made me assume that Davis knew that a lot of these bad draft picks and signings, so that had to be Mayock, right? I'm going to assume that. Now, it could be just simply that Mark Davis thought Ziegler and McDaniels will just be better, and they wanted them to come in as a package deal, and maybe it wasn't all Mayock's fault. He just thinks, Ziegler's better. That's also a possibility. But then finally, Mayock spoke out. So Mayock has been quiet, kind of went into hiding, and that's kind of makes sense after getting canned, right? Like, he made millions of dollars. It's not like he desperately needs a job, but I'm sure he wants a job. He's older, but not retired. And he finally broke his silence. He went on the Dan Patrick show. And he talked about a couple things. The Dan Patrick kind of, as the seasoned interviewer that he is, kind of buttered him up to start with some, hey, what do you think of the draft? What do you think of this guy? What do you think of that guy? And then he got into the nitty-gritty with Mayock. So we made a video on our channel. It's a short. I'll put it down in the comment section when the show's over, on Mayock talking about getting fired. And you can tell he's pretty bitter. But before he even got into talking about himself, Mayock had a pretty good answer that really told me that Mayock was probably a big part of these bad draft picks. Take a listen.
I used to have conversations with coaches all the time and scouts about, look, if you value Malik Willis on your board, if he's the 14th best player on the board, you technically should have no business taking him at 2. However, if you really believe he's the guy, what does it matter where you took him?
So what have Soto and I been talking about for as long as the show's been around? You've got to treat draft picks like a commodity, like capital, not just a wish list, because they're worth something, right? Even if you really love Clay Farrell, right? Wanted Cleveland Farrell, obviously was a bad choice, right? Let's say you really wanted him. You didn't have to get him at number 4. You could have got him in the second round. So even if he's your guy, that pick has value, and you don't want to overspend for that. It's like anything else in the world. Like, maybe I really, really want a Dodge Ram. Like, I just really want this pickup truck, and it's the truck I want, and it's the only car I want. Why would I pay $200,000 for it when I can get it for $50,000? Even if I know that's the only truck I'm going to get. It's kind of the same thing with drafts. If you know you can get a guy later on, or even you're pretty sure you can get a guy later on, why do you go ahead and do it early? And the other problem with this is Mayock and Gruden, and it sounds like this is more Mayock, need to have the self-awareness that we miss on picks. You got to have that self-awareness. We reach sometimes, right? If you have a long history of just crushing picks, like you go outside the box and you're getting guys that no one thought of and you're nailing it, then okay. Then you can be like, hey, I know myself. I know like everyone else is saying this guy's a 3rd rounder, but I think he's a 1st rounder. Then maybe you have a little bit of cachet to say, okay, I'm gonna take some risks. But even then, it's all about value. And when you're hearing Mayock talk, like, yeah, if you're convinced he's the guy, then what's the downside of taking him too high? It's because you're losing draft capital. If you know the guy's not going to go till 14, trade down. Be better at trading. Right? It sounds like that's what the Raiders tried to do with number 4 in 2019 to get Clelin Ferrell, but they couldn't. So don't do it. Get him later. You had 3 first-round picks in that one, right? In that draft. So this kind of tells me that Mayock, I think he was a bigger part of the poor drafting than we let on. Now, of course, the flip side of that coin is what about, Max Crosby in 4 or Hunter Renfrow in 5? That kind of felt like Mayock to me as well. But, man, the whole idea of if you're convinced he's the guy, then there's no downside to go get him. It's like, yeah, there is. The best example was the last draft when everyone was flipping out, rightfully so, that they got Alex Leatherwood in the first round and Trayvon Morgan in the second. And everyone's like, and the guys who were trying to, because Mayock's a good guy. Like, as a personality, I liked him. I loved his leadership. When Gruden got fired, he was the guy that did the press conference, not Mark Davis, not the team president. They had the GM, Mayock, a friend of Gruden, having to go on there and not defend Gruden's actions because you can't look like that, right? It'll make you look terrible, saying he shouldn't have been fired. The emails weren't that bad. That makes you look awful. But you still got to take a stance there. You still got to be a leader. He did a great job there. So I had high hopes for him. Obviously didn't pan out. But you look at that last draft and everyone's like, oh, man, it's so dumb. Why'd you get Leatherwood at 1 and Morgan at 2? And then people who were trying to defend it would say, well, if they would have went Morgan at 2 and Morgan at 1 and Leatherwood at 2, then no one would be complaining. Instead of the 2 guys, then what does that matter? Because we traded a 4th rounder to get Morgan. We traded up to get him. We had to give up capital to get that guy. That's the best example of what we've done wrong in drafts, is not understanding values of picks. You're falling in love with the guy, and you'll do whatever it takes to get him, and you'll overpay and you'll reach for him. It's people are trying to defend it. It's it was a good move. No, this is the best example of how it was a bad move. All right, that's my Mayock rant. So Derek Carr talks. So Josh McDaniels is at the owners' meetings, right? The coaches go to the owners' meetings, and that's a chance for them to do some media. So our friend Vic Tafer of The Athletic got a hold of Josh McDaniels, and this is what he said about Derek Carr's extension. Vic tweets, Josh McDaniels says Raiders are trying to build around Derek Carr. As far as extension talks, quote, Derek's going to have to make decisions about what's best for him, and we have to try to do what's right for the team. There will be a sweet spot in there, hopefully, for everybody. So not a lot there. Kind of bland. It sounds like the initial process has started, and it's just kind of going at its own pace, right? It's kind of feels like, hey, they're barely touching, they barely touched on it. They're really not in a giant rush. I don't think they put pen to paper until after June 1st anyway, when some cash frees up, right? Those post June 1 cuts, that's when cash comes up. So they can, of course, still do the deal, and they can, of course, still have a handshake deal on it. But they're not going to probably do anything until money frees up in the summer anyway. So, look, this is my thing with Derek Carr. I've talked extensively about quarterback. The going rate for quarterbacks is a lot, right? Oh, he's not worth that. It's well, gas isn't worth $7 a gallon either. But here we are. We're paying because we have no choice, and it sucks. I don't want to use all our cap space on Derek Carr either, right? We've got needs. Waller's going to want an extension. We still got to sign Renfrow. It's Ren Matthews or Stephon Gilmore. These other DBs that were rumored that we might get, which I'll get to here in a second. I want the free up cash, but this is the reality in the economics of football. You've got quarterbacks have all the leverage, and when you're an above average franchise quarterback like Derek Carr is, you can ask for a lot. So this is what's unique to this situation. I think Derek Carr lost leverage when they signed Davante Adams. Derek Carr has been asking for him, has been wanting him, been wide open about it, and they got him. Your leverage in a negotiation table, if you're an NFL player, is I want this or I'm leaving. That's your only leverage, right? I'm sitting out, I'm leaving, I'm not signing the contract. That's it. That's your leverage. And the organizations have franchise tags. I don't think they'll do that with Carr. I think they'll do it with a quarterback. It's going to cost them $45 million or something. Cost them a crazy amount, right? Because you have to pay him like a top 5 guy. So your only leverage is I'm going to leave if I don't get what I want. That's basically it, right? I can't fathom and I can't possibly imagine Derek Carr leaving after he got Davante Adams. I just can't picture that. So I think what Mayock and Ziegler, so like every single investment, you want to think of it in a grand scheme of things, right? Really smart businessmen, and by all accounts and purposes, Dave Ziegler has that kind of mind. Really smart businessmen invest in something that give you multiple payoffs. Hey, I want to buy a rental property, for example, right? Great. I want to buy, let's say I want to buy a house in Palm Springs, right? I live in Southern California. Palm Springs is a destination. You can golf 365 days a year. There's casinos out there, pools. If you're ever in Palm Springs, go to the Nest. It's an amazing bar. It's like a bar, restaurant, piano bar, DJ. It's awesome. Great. You'll love it there. If you love MILFs, you'll love it even more, right? Let's say I bought a house in Palm Springs. I want a vacation there. If I'm a really smart businessman, I'm going to vacation there, do what I want to do. I'm going to rent it out, Airbnb it, make some money back. I'm going to use it as a tax write-off. So all the expenses that go into it are a write-off. I'm going to use it in multiple ways, right? I'm going to buy something and have it give me multiple types of returns. So I think part of this thinking for Dave Ziegler, getting rid of a first and second round pick for Davante Adams and making him, at the time, the highest paid receiver in football was, okay, we're going to throw a ton of money at Davante Adams, and he's worth it by himself. But if we get Davante Adams, that will also mean, hopefully, we have to pay Derek Carr a little less. Because now we've kind of cornered him a little bit. Now we're saying, hey, we know you're not going to leave. We got your college teammate here. So I think that's part of the rationale from Dave Ziegler in giving Davante Adams so much money was we can make it up with Derek Carr. We can make it up in the back end. Because now we've got a little bit of a better spot negotiation-wise with Derek Carr. So it's worth giving Davante Adams all this money. Well, again, like I said, if I want that vacation house in Palm Springs, it's worth it by itself. But if I can get extra stuff out of it, rent it for some extra cash, use it as tax write-off, all these other things, then it's a better investment. That's what smart businessmen do. That's what smart GMs do. Now, if I'm Derek Carr's agent, I'm saying, oh, screw that. That doesn't matter. It's all about what you would pay, and we deserve market rate, and here's where he ranks, and here's what quarterbacks get. Like, a smart agent's going to do that. He's not going to let that happen. But that is definitely a part of the conversation. Derek, we got you your guy. We went out and sacrificed for your guy, and it cost us a lot of money. We know you're not going to leave because we got your guy. Let's shave off $7 million off that contract or something like that, right? I think that's part of it. I got more stuff to get to, but let's get to your questions instead. Nick 209, hopefully Carr gets a friendly contract, that sweet spot. Well, yeah, I hope so. But again, I hate the phrase team-friendly contract. I hate it because quarterbacks don't do that. They don't take less money just to be good guys. It doesn't happen. Oh, Tom Brady. Tom Brady had $1 bajillion. His wife makes more money than him, and I'm still convinced he's getting money off the books. So I don't like the Tom Brady. Don't give me Tom Brady. And again, give me another example of a guy having all the leverage to get more money and just saying, I'm a nice guy. I want less money. That never happens. Guys take less money for different reasons, right? Maybe they have a little less leverage, like this Davante Adams situation like I just brought up. Maybe it can cut into the cost of Derek Carr a little bit. But quarterbacks maximize their leverage, maximize their value, and get as much as they can. Sometimes they take less money to be in a better situation because they can get more money later, right? Like Jameis Winston, going to New Orleans, like being in that type of great offense could raise your stock, right? That's a chance to kind of raise your stock. And so maybe you reinvest, maybe you take less money somewhere to, reinvest in yourself and grow. That's not team friendly. That's just reinvesting yourself. So if I could ask one favor, Raider Nation, let's get rid of the phrase team-friendly contracts because it doesn't happen. You can say, hopefully we get him cheap. Hopefully we negotiate a great deal. Hopefully Derek Carr realizes where his leverage is. Like, let's use those phrases instead. Let's try to make it a thing to get rid of the team-friendly contract. Dub9 Raider, no doubt Mayock acts like he didn't whiff on big free agents and top draft picks. I was disappointed he didn't own up to that. Well, I would love for everyone to admit when they make mistakes. But Mayock is currently a unemployed human being. Right? He needs to look as good as possible. That's why he goes on to his friend Dan Patrick's radio show to try to make him look, to try to look good. And this isn't a knock on Dan Patrick. This isn't malfeasance by either one of them. That's just what you do, right? Dan Patrick wants the views, wants the hits, and Mike Mayock does that for him, and Mayock wants a friendly platform to raise his stock, right? That's what, that's just smart media management. And if Mayock is anything, he's good at media management, right? So he's trying to make himself look as good as possible, whether getting back on TV or getting another like GM or scouting job with one of the teams or something like that. Like, he doesn't want to look like it's a problem. And honestly, it's pretty easy to dump all the blame on John Gruden. And Gruden and Mayock are boys. So if I'm Gruden, I would say, yeah, go ahead. Like, Gruden's not going to be getting a job anytime soon. I'm still convinced he will bounce back from this one day, because guys bounce back from far, far worse than being shitty in emails 10 years ago. He will come back, but I'd be right now. I'd be like, you know what, Mike? Go ahead and shit on me. Blame everything on me to make yourself look good, because it's fine. It's like your boy, like, how many times have, like, your boy, gotten in trouble with his girl, and you're like, hey, you know what? Just blame it on me. Say, I was a bad influence. Say, I got you drunk, and I refused to drive you back home. That's why you came home at 2 a.m. hammered. Blame it on RJ. That's fine. Like, I'll take that bullet for you. That's what. If I was Gruden, I'd be like, you know what? I'm going to do that for you, Mayock, and then, Mayock, you got to come back. You got to pay me back one day. It's like, when you're a GM somewhere, you got to put in a good word for me, or if you're back at NFL Network or another broadcast partner, you got to put in a good word for me. Like, that's what you do with coaches. That's what you do in just smart business, is just doing favors for people. Hefe, KC, the longer Raiders take, the more it's going to cost the Raiders to sign Carr. I don't know if I buy that. Now, it may be true, but I'm not convinced that it's just purely like a timeline, and it just like goes up with time. Like, the wide receiver market went nuts because the Jacksonville Jaguars went crazy with Zay Jones, and then Devontae got paid, and then Tyreek Hill got paid. If anything, if I'm looking to sign a receiver, I'm waiting because the market went crazy right now, right? I think, like, with wide receivers, you wait. Now, it is true that season to season to season, quarterbacks cost more and more and more, right? Like, as the salary cap goes up and the cost of quarterbacks go up, like, Joe Burrow is going to get an insane contract. It's going to be nuts what he's going to get, right? So that's also why I've been saying, like, let's sign Carr to a long-term deal, like a 5-year deal. He's still got like at least 5 years of prime. Like, he's only getting better. Like, he's really entering his prime. He's better now than he was in 2016 when he got third in MVP voting. Like, he's better now. And he's only getting better. Like, his body's not going to completely fall apart. Like, the quarterbacks, like, you can play a long time. I'm not saying everyone's going to be Tom Brady playing mid-40s. But 30 to 35 in 2022, that's kind of your sweet spot. And so Derek Carr's only going to cost more. So I'm with you in that waiting for multiple seasons is going to cost more. But waiting a week or month, I don't think it's going to cost more. W9 Raider, also, you're so right. Neither him or Gruden understood value. And that's why you never, of all people, Colin Cowherd put this great on his radio show a while ago. He said, you need GMs to do the math because coaches fall in love with players. You need to fall in like with players. My little sister, when she was like 13, I overheard her on the phone, and it made me laugh so much. She's like, well, I kind of like him, but I'm not in like with him. That's what 13-year-old girls, how they talk back in the day. But that's kind of the same way. You have to like players. You can't be in like with players, right? You can't fall in love with players because they are commodities, and some of them got to go, right? People say, oh, you love Derek Carr. It's like, yeah, I think Derek Carr's been great for the Raiders. He's put up with a lot of shit and still delivered and never complained. If we can get someone better than Carr, I'm in. If you can get me a good, smart deal that gets us a better quarterback than Derek Carr, I'm in. And a few people have to defend Derek Carr more than me. But, again, like, what's best is what's best for the silver and black, not best for the actual player. Frank Fiore, what do you think about trading Waller? Because I think it's stupid as fuck. back to my initial point. Do I want to get rid of Waller? Do I think the team's better in a bubble without Waller? Of course not. But are there situations where trading Waller is the best move? Absolutely. If we can get someone like imagine our offense next season with Derek Carr throwing to the Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, Kenyon Drake out of the backfield, Jacobs running between the tackles. Like my hair's going up on my arm. My nipples are rock hard right now thinking about how great our offense is going to be. But if we just simply can't afford him and we can get a king's ransom for Darren Waller, it's something we got to look at. You are a bad GM if you say there is no situation where I will trade Darren Waller. You are a bad GM if you fall in love with a player like that, right? So again, I definitely don't want Darren Waller gone, but if there's a situation that makes it worth trading Darren Waller, then you've got to look at it. M85, 2 to 3 years for Carr sounds great. Again, if after 3 years, we're going to have to pay him more. Going to have to pay him more because the market for quarterbacks just keep going up and up and up. Remember 4 seasons ago, Derek Carr was the highest paid quarterback in football for like 45 minutes until Stafford got his contract, and then Patrick Mahomes, and everyone's got more and more contracts. Now he's next season will be the 14th highest paid quarterback in football, under $20 million for a 3-time Pro Bowl quarterback in his prime. Like, that's a steal. That's absolute steal. Longer contracts are the way to go, especially with quarterbacks entering their primes. Now, I'm willing to coordinate something else. Like I brought up the idea of maybe you do an extension, you guarantee the money that he's supposed to get this season, just under $20 million, and then you add like a 2-year, $80 million extension after that. So basically, it's like a 3-year, $100 million deal. Basically, it kind of rounds out to $33 million per season. And of course, you can move the money around based on cap space, right? Like if you need to front load it or back load it or whatever, like you can do that. But essentially, it averages out to like $33 million a year. I can live with that. Again, when he turns 33 and 2025 rolls around and he's playing well, we're going to have to pay him again. And it's going to be more. Do the 5-year deal. It's smarter in the long term. And let's say Carr falls apart, you trade him. Like Carson Wentz has been thrown around like a village bicycle. And you're still getting value for him, and he's still getting money. Like Carr would have to be like completely implode and turn into the worst quarterback in football for him to lose all value after a bad season or two. Because we've seen quarterbacks completely fall apart, and desperate teams still trade for them. These smart teams still get value out of these guys. Like it's like buying Bitcoin, or it's just buying something that just always gains value, right? It's like buying land. It's like maybe it dips, right? Like market goes up and down, but if you just like buy land, if you buy franchise quarterbacks, you keep franchise quarterbacks under contract, their value goes like this. Keep them. This isn't even like me just loving Carr. Like, oh, I love Carr so much, pay him. Like, no, he's a franchise starting quarterback with 3 Pro Bowls. People want him. If he was on the open market right now, you get $50 million a year. Guaranteed. Because people are desperate for quarterbacks. Dark Raider. Carr said he didn't want to be the highest paid. He wanted to win, taking most. The cap isn't really a winning mentality. It's bag chasing. Well, first off, Carr didn't say he didn't want to be the highest paid. He said he's been the highest paid, and he still wants to win. Let's make sure we're getting the facts straight here, right? He didn't say, I don't want to be the highest paid. He said, I've been the highest paid, and what's important to me is winning. And again, if you're saying my quarterback is bad and a bad teammate, and I don't like him because he maximized his value and he leveraged his position to get as much money as possible, you're going to hate your quarterback every single time. Every single quarterback does that. Every single player does that. They get as much money as they can, as they should. That's people act in their best interests. Like how many people in whatever your job is, truck driver, carpenter, lawyer, and you're like, yeah, I have the leverage to get a $100,000 salary, but but I'm going to take 80 because I want the company to do better. No one does that, nor should they. So I don't know why we expect our quarterbacks to do that. These are still normal human beings. Gun Nerd. Waller has some weird quirks coming out. I love him as a football player, but he hasn't mentioned that Devontae Adams came to the roster, mentioning a voice inside him saying negative things. Trade him. Are we getting a little rambunctious here? Are we getting a little weird? We want to trade him because he has some quirks. You know what his quirks are? Catching touchdown passes. You know what his quirks are? Being the fastest tight end in football. You know what his quirks are? Being 6'6" and unguardable. Too big for corners. Too fast for safeties. Too quick for linebackers. That's his quirks. He was arguably the best player on our team last season. When he was, and last season was a good one for him, right? He was hurt, right? But like going into the season, he was probably our best player with Rodney Hudson traded. I think you see Raiders can't afford $40 million for Carr. Yeah, I think they can. Raider Dangles. I don't know if that's an innuendo that I should be laughing at or something else. Do you think the guarantees Watson got changed things for Carr and his agent? Not drastically. Every new contract changes the next contract, right? So I would say yes, but it's just kind of like the natural order of things. Like Derek Carr's deal 4 years ago affected Matthew Stafford's deal, which affected Patrick Mahomes' deal, which affected Tom Brady's deal, which affected Aaron Rodgers' deal, which affected Deshaun Watson's deal, right? This is what I'm saying is every single contract gets bigger if you're a quarterback. And he's just the latest one. I'm nervous for Jacobs on draft day round 2, says John Q. I assume that means you're nervous that we're going to trade Jacobs. And I've been saying for a long time, we should trade Josh Jacobs this season. Or maybe wait till, early midseason when a quarterback, a playoff caliber team or like a Super Bowl contender just has like the running back room ravaged. Think like the Ravens last season. I know because I had multiple of their guys on my fantasy football team and fuck me. But if you got like a quality team and they get desperate and they run out of running backs and they want a guy like Jacobs, who's a very good running back, you make that move. Because we're not going to pay Jacobs his almost $10 million coming up for his 5th year. We shouldn't do it. Trade him, get value. Hefe Raiders tried cornering the wide receiver market, but now the quarterback market about to bite that ass. Atex DaCosta, 5 years, $20 million, $100 million guaranteed. Yep, that works. I just don't want – I want it to be a true 5-year deal for Derek Carr, though. I want that 5th year him to actually play on it, not just these, bullshit void years to spread the cap out. I want it to be – I want to lock him up for 5 years. And either he plays great, wonderful, we keep him, and he's going to be cheap. Whatever deal we give him, I guarantee you it'll be a cheap, awesome deal 2 seasons from now. Guaranteed. No doubt in my mind. No matter what contract we give him. 2 seasons from now, it will be a steal. It will be a good deal. Lego my ego. So what is your real... A lot of Chiefs in here. You guys must be worried about us Raiders. A lot of Chiefs in the chat. Spying on the silver and black. I see you guys. What is your realistic season's prediction for the Raiders this year? Okay. Great question. Last year, we were 10-7. Made it to the playoffs, 10 wins, with the worst troubling season in NFL history. Losing John Gruden, losing Henry Ruggs the way we did, the problem with Damon Arnett, losing Darren Waller for 5 games, 5 or 6, I think 5 games. Kenyon Drake getting hurt. And also, the other thing that no one talked about, I've been told forever, hey, when a player comes out as gay, it's going to be a real problem in the locker room. Carl Nassib came out, and it wasn't a problem in that locker room. All these things should have been big problems, right? We overcame all of that shit and had the second best Raiders season in the last 2 decades. Now, on paper, we're better personnel-wise. All of our young guys are 1 season more experienced and better. But there are some question marks, right? Is this roster going to be able to handle Josh McDaniels' new system and pick it up right away? Right? Are they going to pick up the system right away? Defense, this new scheme, are they going to pick it up right away? That's a big part of it. Also, the division is just getting better, right? We've been saying forever the Broncos are just one decent quarterback away from being a real problem. Now they have a 9-time Pro Bowler, right? The Broncos are reloading. The Chiefs are the only team that got worse, right? They're the shedding guys for cap space, right? Losing Tyreek Hill and 2 big playmakers on defense. Chiefs are the only team that got worse. So that's the big question is the Raiders are going to be a better team next season than they were last season, but their division's getting better. And the schedule is going to be a bitch. NFC West, and now we're playing 3 more teams that are, because for those you don't know, right, you do your 6 division games, and then you play 8 games of the 2 conferences, and then you have 3 games left that you play teams that were comparable to you. So we're going to have to play 3 playoff teams, as opposed to when we were losing, right? When we were 4-12, the next year those 2 games were easier teams, you play comparable. So the roster's much better, but there's also question marks with every single team, like in the division. We did a whole like segment on this, I think 2 shows ago. The Chiefs are shedding contracts left and right. Their roster's not going to be quite the same. I don't believe in the coach in the Chargers at all. I think he's dragging the team down, even though that roster's fantastic. And how much does Russell Wilson have left? And also, I don't think that defense in Denver is going to be as good as it was last season without Vic Fangio. So, a lot of question marks. AFC West is absolutely loaded, but there's just no rock. There's no just like pure stability with any of them. There's just changes everywhere. Have you heard anything? UFC question. Have you heard anything about John Jones comeback now that Chandler can watch him in Vegas? Yeah, that's the worst that ever happened to John Jones. Is his brother going to Las Vegas, where John Jones just gets arrested every time he's there? Like, uh-oh. The best thing that could happen to John Jones is for Chandler Jones to get traded to like Buffalo or Kansas City or Green Bay. It's like some team, the cities with the worst party scene would be the best thing for John Jones. In all fairness, John Jones will find trouble wherever he goes. Gun Nerd, Carr will extend. There's no way both parties don't come together at the right price. That's what I think. I think both sides know what each other's leverage is. Both sides want the same thing. Carr wants to stay there. McDaniels and Ziegler, I don't think, take this job if they don't have a franchise quarterback in place, like a Derek Carr. So we're starting at a good place, right? It seems like they're starting at a place of mutual respect. They both want the same things. Again, when you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, nothing is easy and everything's kind of up for grabs. But when you have the foundation that McDaniels, Ziegler, and Carr have, you've built common ground already. Sometimes you go to a negotiation table and it's terrible and the relationship's bad, and the first thing you got to do is get to a point where you can talk to each other, to the point where you trust each other, to the point where every time I say something, I'm over here, you think I'm not doing something with my left hand, right? Like, sometimes that's the first thing you got to do is just get in the same room and trust each other. I feel like they're already there. Now, constructive discussions should come next pretty easy. Code 17, great question. What's the minimum record for you to call 2022 a success? Awesome question. Everyone I've talked, so Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler, not to repeat everything I said, but of all the shit they've overcome, the team overcame last season, and assuming it's just a normal season this season, right? You don't have wide receivers killing people with DUIs. You don't have DBs threatening people with guns on social media. You don't have head coaches getting canned 5 games into the season for emails. Assuming it's just a normal season, there's no reason why they shouldn't be better than last season. Better roster, no drama, or at least less drama, right? Now, obviously, the AFC West got better, and the schedule's going to be tougher. But McDaniels and Ziegler have no excuses. People are talking about, Derek Carr's no excuse this season. He's got his wide receiver, blah, blah, blah. You know who has no excuse? Josh McDaniels. He's the guy with no excuse. You never, ever see GMs and head coaches get cake jobs like this. Normally, when you're firing a GM and your entire coaching staff, it's because your team sucked. It's because you're coming off of a bad season. It's because you're starting over. You never see regime changes for 10-win playoff teams. It takes extenuating circumstances like John Gruden getting canned because of emails for something like this to happen. That's why Nick Ziegler waited this long to get a team. They've had job offers, but you know what? I don't think Josh McDaniels wanted to go to the Giants or the Jets or Jacksonville or these shit franchises. He didn't want to deal with that. He's like, why would I, he was the highest paid assistant in football. It's like, why would I go through the hell of trying to bring a bad franchise up when I can just be the highest paid assistant with Belichick in New England, right? So he made this move knowing that he had to succeed, right? And that's the cost-benefit analysis. Like, if he would have went to the Jets or the Giants or Jacksonville, and he could have said, all right, I took him for a bad team. I can afford some losses. Like, it's a slow burn. It's going to take me a few seasons to get this team up, to get this team better, right? He had that excuse in his back pocket. You take over a 10-win team with a franchise quarterback that just went to the playoffs, you don't have those excuses. You took over a good team. So, honestly, 11 wins. 11 wins is the goal. Like, that's one win better than last season. Anything less, and I think that's a disappointment. Breaking. So glad Eagles content creators are as good as they are. Came to see an off-team stream and sheesh. Go back to your Eagles stuff. Raiders angles. Opinion on the offensive line. Do you think it's going to hold the Raiders back? Hopefully McDaniels can scheme around this weakness. So it sounds to me like McDaniels, Ziegler, that staff, think this offensive line is better than it performed last season. I think they think that Tom Cable just coached them poorly. I think that's what they're thinking. Now, again, there's still time in free agency. The draft is still coming up, so they can make some improvements. But, they signed Brandon Parker to starting money. $3 million is that's not for a backup. You're not paying Brandon Parker backup money. You're paying him to be a starter. So I think they think that they have a line that they can work with. I'm not saying they think it's a good line. I'm not saying it's a unit that they can build their whole offense around and a unit they're going to lean on. Obviously, they're going to lean on Carr and his amazing weapons, Waller, Renfro, Adams, Drake, etc. I think what they think the basis of the offense is. But I think they think that our line we can win with. Not going to be the strength of the team, but they can win with them because they're just not making moves. So more on Derek Carr. So with Josh McDaniels at the owners' meetings and stuff and doing interviews, again, our friend Vic Tafer chimed in. This is Josh McDaniels on Derek Carr. Derek's fit on the team as a player is obviously what we're looking for and what we're trying to build around. Our relationship continues to grow personally. We won't be able to do anything on the field for a bit. And as far as the extension, ultimately you try and do what's best for the team. I think both sides got to do what's best for the team, for them. When we get into these conversations with Derek's going to have to make decisions about what's best for him. That's what each man's right is. And at the same, we have to try to do what's right for the team. There will be a sweet spot in there, hopefully, for everybody. We'll be excited to go forward like that. So it kind of goes more to what I'm saying. All this car talk, getting hot and bothered. Take the sweater off. So that's kind of what we've been saying, right? I think he understands what a lot of fans don't understand. Carr is going to do what's best for Derek Carr. As he should. As every player does. As every human being does. You do what's best for you. And you can't be mad at Carr for that. The Carr's saying, hey, I want as much money as guys that are comparable to me. And I have all this leverage because There's 32 teams in the NFL, and there's only like 18 good starting quarterbacks, maybe 20, or like 20 quarterbacks that you can win with, right? That's even including like the Jimmy Garoppolos of the world that are like not like he's not going to win for you, but you can win with him. There's only like 20 quarterbacks that can play the position. There's 32 teams. He knows that. He's got leverage. Let's go to Lego Mayock. What are your thoughts on the NFL saying every team must hire a female coach? So I believe it's so I'm not a big getting your job based on anything other than your skills type guy. But that happens in the NFL all the time. Like nepotism is rife in the NFL. There's so many like coaches' sons getting gigs, coaches' brothers getting gigs, the son of a friend of the coach getting gigs. Like that's already a problem in the NFL. There's already tons of people that have jobs in the NFL not because of their skills as a coach or scouts or analyst or whatever the job may be, right? So if you're adding another one, whatever. I mean, these staffs in the NFL are huge. If it was you have to hire an NFL head coach, that's a different story. But it's like, you know what, you can just hire kind of anybody. Then there's no problem. I mean, there's assistant scouts. There's so many, like when we talk about coaches on teams, you're talking, you know, head coaches, offensive coordinators, guys that are making very big, important decisions, and they're getting paid millions of dollars. We're not talking about like the assistant to the backup scout secretary. Like there's a lot of positions that you can fill, and having someone in there that maybe isn't qualified and only has that job for another reason, it's not going to torpedo the team. Gun Nerd, I'm going to predict Denzel Perryman gets traded to the Colts. He's a good 4-3 stack Mike linebacker, but he's not mobile enough to be consistent in pass coverage. We'll see. So Denzel Perryman's if there's a time to trade him, it would be now, right? Coming off of the Pro Bowl season. And obviously, I think you said Colts because, you know, our coach is back there, right? I think a lot of guys are going to, a lot of Gus Bradley guys are going to go there because it's a very specific system, and very specific guys thrive in that system and don't really thrive in other systems. But I kind of like our linebacker group now. We got some youth, we got some experience, we got a Pro Bowler. Maybe Perriman doesn't fit exactly what this new system requires, but he's not a liability. And if we're running in like nickel and dime all the time anyway, we're not going to need Perriman to do that much coverage, right? He's not going to be, he's not running a 4-4 type defense, right? Like, we'll see. I like him as a personality too. I just like him as a dude. He's one of the guys who's like, he's just funny, infectious personality. He's great. He's the guy you want to keep away from your girl. Smooth talker. Sam Cal Grizzly Raider. What are your thoughts on the new overtime rules? I'm the guy. Not that I like ties. I like the actual result of two teams being out there, right? What do I mean by that, RJ? Well, if two teams really are equal, like on that Sunday, right? Week 7, Raiders versus Dolphins, and that day they're equal. Like the best result that shows, like the best metric that defines what happened on that field that day is a tie, then it's a tie. I'd rather the best score that represents what happened on that field be there than force someone to win, than forcing somebody into a win-lose situation, right? I'd rather, if a tie represents what happened on the field that day, then so be it. Let it be a tie. And as we saw last season, ties can be awesome. Remember Week 17, Raiders-Chargers, greatest game ever, and a tie means that both teams go and the Steelers don't? Like that added, like that was the best game of the season, and that added to the high drama. The Steelers watching the game were sweating till Carlson's final field goal that got him into the playoffs. Like ties can be exhilarating because the result changes things, right? So I'm not one of these guys that's like, hey, we have to make sure there's never a tie again. And if this is just for playoffs, try to fair it up. But, so fair play. But that's my big take of it. I'm fine with ties if that's what actually represents what happened on the field. If you play 5 quarters of football, you play 75 minutes, 75 hard minutes in the gridiron, and we don't know which team's better, then it's a tie. That represents what happened on that field. We better not lose because of the O-line. I mean, I don't want to lose because of the O-line. But look, this, you got to understand, with salary cap, you got to create strengths and weaknesses in a team that complement each other, right? I always use this example. The 49, if you want just the best of every position, the best of every guy, you can't do it. You don't have the salary cap. It's not possible, right? So you've got to pick and choose where your assets are. You got to pick and choose how you do something. And really, really good GMs go fit, and this is something Soto and I disagree on, because he wants just buy the best guys that aren't scheme dependent. That's great, right? Like Devontae Adams. You play any scheme. He's amazing. Mwah, beautiful. He's a fucking Raider. But, and you can afford to do that sometimes, but what you want are guys that are cheaper but do exactly what you need them to do. Look at Gus Bradley and his defense, right? You can get cheap-ass guys that they fit his scheme. They don't work in Denver. They don't work in New England. They don't work in Miami, but they sure work with Gus Bradley, and you can get them for cheap. I always use the example of the Niners offensive line. They're small, right? John Gruden wanted big, hulking linemen, right? He wanted Trent Brown, Rodney Hudson, Gabe Jackson. He wanted to just punch guys in the throat, right? The Niners aren't that. They're small, but they're agile. So because they're so undersized, you can get them cheaper, but they fit the Niners scheme, right? Wyman, guards pulling, tackles sealing and moving up to the second level. That's what they want, is guys that can do that, right? So hopefully that's what we're getting with our O-line. They're pretty cheap, right? They're pretty cheap O-line. But if they can do what Josh McDaniels needs of them, not be the best line in football, not having the best players on our line ever in football, but if they can do what McDaniels needs them to do at a cheap rate, that's the best move. And hopefully that's what we're doing. Perriman can play in any system. Take him out on obvious passing downs if necessary, but you want guys like that. Yeah, I don't want to make any drastic moves at linebacker. Ritter Dangles, has anyone confirmed who's calling plays? I assume it's McDaniels, but wonder what Lombardi's role as OC. McDaniels has already come out and said he's going to be calling the plays. He's already said that. He's already said, yeah, I'm going to be the play caller. Which it should be, right? If you're paying all this money for Josh McDaniels and arguably his best skill is play calling, you want him to play call, right? You don't want it. You're hiring him because what made him great, what made him an asset, what made him the highest paid assistant in football was his play calling. Now he's good at other stuff, right? Good scheme, and seems to be a pretty decent talent developer. Hopefully he's learned his lessons from Denver as a head coach, right? But you want that skill. That's what you're hiring him for, is that skill. You don't want just a CEO head coach, right? A guy that just kind of runs the meetings and knows how to organize. If you're hiring a guy with a skill, you want it to be used. So yeah, he's play calling. And in I forgot which interview, I think maybe a press conference when McDaniels talked about it, but he talked about how Lombardi, he wants Lombardi to, I think he's grooming Lombardi to take over play calling at some point. But the way he described it, he wants Lombardi to be the offensive coordinator in running the meetings and answering the emails, right? Kind of a strenuous kind of bitch work that comes with being an offensive coordinator. Josh McDaniels wants that off his shoulders, which he should, right? When you're a head coach, your time is valuable. So you want an offensive coordinator that knows your system, that thinks like you, that can play call if you need to, but just take some of the load off of your shoulders so you can do all the other jobs that come with being a head coach. Bill 916, I'm more worried about coaching than anything at this point. Well, I think that's valid. I think that's fair. So me, Soto, and our other third host, Rory, are all completely different on this regime. Soto is so optimistic. He's like McDaniels. He's learned his lesson. He's a great play caller. He's a drastic improvement. He's the best that happened to the Raiders. He's all in. He is stoked, right? Rory is like, this is going to suck. I don't think he's the guy. It's going to take multiple seasons for this team to understand the new scheme. He was all about like punting on this season and just rebuilding, right? I'm somewhere in the middle. So I try to be an evidence-based guy. I try to be, all right, this is what the data says. This is what the history, I was a history major in college. Like, this is what the history says, this is what the data says. So this is what it is, right? All the hard data on Josh McDaniels says he's a bad head coach. Because he's literally never succeeded anywhere other than New England, under Belichick, under Kraft, with Brady, etc. Right? He's never succeeded anywhere. He sucked in Denver for that season and a half, and he was and the like people forget the one season he was the offensive coordinator after Denver. He was the Rams' offensive coordinator. They had arguably the worst offense in football that season. So he's literally failed everywhere except New England. Now, that's the hard numbers and the facts and the history, but kind of the extra part on top, kind of the frosting on top, I've been very impressed with him. Like, he's one of the hardest things to do as any human, let alone someone who's adored like a football coach, let alone a millionaire football coach, is being self-aware, knowing your faults, knowing your issues, not letting your ego get in the way. And McDaniels has said all the right things. Oh, I learned my lesson. I knew that I wasn't a good people person. The X's and O's, I'm great, but I need to be better at being a people person. He's got a little notebook that he keeps with him that he writes all his mistakes that he did, right? So I'm cautiously optimistic that Josh McDaniels learned from his mistakes from a decade ago, got better, and will be a good head coach for us. Cautiously optimistic. But I will say this, Billy 916. If Josh McDaniels falls flat in his face, right? If it's as bad as it was in Denver, he's canned after a season and a half, I think it's going to be one of those situations where we're going to look back and say we should have saw this coming. I think we fast forward 2 seasons from now, and Josh McDaniels terrible. I think we're all going to look at each other and say, we should have saw this coming because of his history as a head coach. Roll back the clock. Sudden death works for me. I'm with it. I'm down with it. John Head, O-line will be fine. You know, it's only 5 words that you just said, but I think that's probably the best way to describe it is I don't think anyone's expecting big things from the O-line. But I think hoping it'll be fine, just like fine, like serviceable. Look, the Bengals went to the Super Bowl with a trash O-line. I'm not saying don't have I'm not saying we should have a bad O-line. I'm saying you can overcome it. And this is the other part about O-lines, and I've said it on this show before, but it bears repeating. I forget the stat. I got to look it up. I always say I'm going to look it up, and I keep forgetting. But Bill Barnwell of ESPN looked up a great stat of how continuity on the O-line is what the best prediction for success. Something like the last 15 years, only 10 teams had the starting O-line that did snap number 1 in week 1 and finished the season with all 5 guys, right? No one got traded, no one got hurt, no one got demoted, no one got moved around. The 5 guys that started left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, right tackle were the same 5 guys that played the last snap of the season. It only happened 10 times in the last 15 years. And something like 8 of those teams went to the Super Bowl. It was an insane number. Continuity on the O-line is more important than skill on the O-line. I repeat, continuity at the O-line is more important than skill at the O-line. And I think McDaniels and Ziegler are thinking the same way. It's like, look, let's just coach the guys we have. Most of them are young. Other than Denzel Good, none of them are really injury prone, right? Andre James not really injury prone. Alex Leatherwood played all 17 games, no injury. Brendan Parker not really injury prone. Andre James not really injury prone. These are basically young guys. 3 of them are cheap, and they don't get hurt that often. And they've played a whole season together. Let's build on that. Let's build on continuity. I think there's something to that. I really think there's something to that. Oscar 408, looking forward to seeing our ability to adapt on a weekly/series basis. Yeah, that'd be nice, right? That'd be a nice change of pace. And that's the biggest asset for Josh McDaniels, right? His play calling and his ability to adapt, right? No matter who he went from a running quarterback to a pocket quarterback in New England, all these different types of quarterbacks, and he was able to find ways to find at least levels of success depending on who you have. And that's the adaptability that we didn't have with Gruden. Gruden's like, this is what I do. This is what I do, and this is how I do it. And there's some value to that in simplicity and execution. You look at like simple like air raid offenses in college. It's just 4 verts, and we're just going to out-execute you. Right? We're not going to be crazy. We're not going to do wild stuff. We're not going to do trick plays. We're just going to out-execute you. We're going to do 3 things really well. We're not going to confuse our own players. Everyone's going to know where to go. Everyone's going to know where to be. Everyone's drilled that route or that run or that blocking package 100 times. We're not going to beat ourselves. We're going to out-execute you. There's something to that. There is something to that. Gun Nerd, it seems like McDaniels is going to be mature enough to delegate this go-around as head coach. I hope so. Sounds like that's the case, right? Andre Styles, funny is Raider fans quick to get excited about a coach that hasn't proven much. I think it's fair to be excited about McDaniels. Again, maybe it's just me, but like, I feel like I have the best take on it. Cautiously optimistic, right? The history, the data, the facts say he's not great. All the developments around that says he's learned from his mistakes and can be better. I think cautiously optimistic is the way to go. TD Sly, is there a chance we trade Darren Waller? We talked about this. This was a question that came at the beginning of the chat. Short answer, yes. Is there a chance? Yes. And with his great contract and how well he's played, you can get a king's ransom for him. And the Raiders, I don't want to trade him at all, especially with Adams and Renfro and how great this offense could be on paper. But I think we'd have to get a great deal, and Waller's gonna have to play really hardball. Like, he wants a raise, he got new management, and like, he'd have to be like really pissed off, like holding out, being a cancer in the locker room. I think it would take something like that, plus a king's ransom to trade Darren Waller, because he's gonna have to play out his contract, right? He's gonna have to play his next season on like $6 million, whatever it is. Best deal in football. And remember, like, Darren, we pulled you off of the Ravens practice squad and signed you to an extension like just a few months later. Like, you played great for us, amazing, and you have every right to negotiate your max value. But we pulled you off the scrap heap, made you something. And the Raiders are a good home for him, right? So many teams, like we heard Marcus Mosher when he came on as a guest like a year ago. And he reminded me that when like Amari Cooper didn't, and it sounds weird now that Amari Cooper's having trouble with the Cowboys and all that's going on with him there. But when he went to the Cowboys, it talks about how the Cowboys set up a chess club just for Cooper to make him feel more at home because they knew he loved chess, right? Raiders don't do stuff like that, but what the Raiders do is they have like mental awareness and mental health is a big thing for them. They have these like mental health meetings, and I don't know if any other NFL team does that, and that's something that Darren Waller needs. Like, the way a chess club spoke to Amari Cooper, mental health awareness and having group chats and stuff like that for the Raiders, what speaks to him. Like, he's in a good place with the Raiders. Like, he fits nicely there, culturally and obviously skill set wise. Eric Snyder, instead of Ruggs, this squad could have had a top flight tackle or guard. Could have anything. He was a first round pick. Could have a lot of things. Don't quote me on it, but New England never overpaid for offensive linemen. They let them go and keep drafting, teaching, coaching, raising new bodies. Yeah, New England never overpaid for really any position. Really. Like, Randy Moss, they paid big. Like, they didn't. Last season was the outlier, not the rule, right? Paying Nelson Aguilar $22 million and 2 high overpaid tight ends. That's not Belichick's MO. That was random. That's the exception, not the rule. If Chandler Jones doesn't perform better than Yannick, do we still make the playoffs? Well, it's also better means a lot of things, right? Like Yannick Ngakoue, he was only good at one thing, getting to the quarterback, getting sacks. He had 10 sacks, which is great. It was what we needed, and that's what we got him for, right? Because coming off like the worst sack season ever. So the guy, we just need a guy that gets to the quarterback. Great, got him. But that's all he did. He had only like 28 total tackles. For a guy that has that many defensive snaps to only have 28 tackles, the guy's a one-trick pony. Just sacks. So if we say, like, does Chandler Jones perform worse than Yannick, does that mean he's only getting 8 sacks? Does that mean he's performing worse, but he gets 80 tackles? If he gets more pressures? If he causes more sacks? If he causes more fumbles, recovers more fumbles? Like, it depends what you mean by better. Chandler Jones is a better overall player than Yannick Ngakoue. And he's great at getting the quarterback. He's great at getting sacks, too. But I'd say, like, I think Yannick would get us more sacks, but Chandler Jones does better at everything else. And so that's what I'm like playing better. Well, don't just go off the sacks, right? It's the flashy number, it's the sexy number, it's an important number. Don't get me wrong, but if you go off just sacks, you're not looking at what Chandler Jones' strengths are. You're not looking at what Yannick Ngakoue's weaknesses are. Billy 916, Nick Lombardi, first year being offensive coordinator, and Graham's system is sketchy. Only time will tell. Is Graham's system sketchy? Giants had no talent on defense last year, and they made him pretty good. And again, Nick Lombardi, like, it looks like he's just doing McDaniels' paperwork as opposed to being the OC. That's kind of what it feels like. What's wrong with being excited? He's killing this offseason. Yeah. Let's be excited. The offseason is a time for optimism. It's time for fun. All right? We got the best wide receiver in football. We got one of the best defensive ends in football. We signed our best end. So far, we're keeping basically all our best guys. It's time for optimism. Let's do it. There's plenty of time for bitching and moaning in football. Lord knows. All right, that's been an hour. That's it for me. Great chat with you guys. Appreciate it. Appreciate all the comments. I'm actually headed to a bachelor party in Tulum, Mexico this evening. I'm hopping on a flight in about 10 hours. So I'm going to be there all the way till Monday. Yeah, they want to do a 5-day bachelor party. If I don't die, I'll be back on Monday. Trying to still figure out when we're going to record the big Wednesday show and the actual like podcasts and clips. So I may be doing it surrounded by strippers and hammered on a beach in Mexico, which will either be the best show ever or the worst show ever. Or maybe I'll just be too hammered to do anything and Soto will do the show solo. I don't know. Buyer beware, right? That's your tease, right? I don't know what's going to happen. But, all right, we'll be back. Great show. Thanks for coming on, everybody. And until next time, knock on wood if you're with me.